Now we move on to the next stage where we are going to discuss the first building block of shared value. So when we talk about shared value, there are two things we come into perspective. Whether shared value is a project or is it an enterprise, right? And point number two, how to identify the right need or right opportunity to start with the shared value journey. Because that is something everybody thinks about and everybody deliberates about. So I would like to invite the panel here for this discussion. Nisha Agarwal, Himanshu, Shiva, Namita, and Girish, and finally, David Wilcox. Thank you.
Everybody comes up, I'll just say good morning, and remember I'm an American. I'm good. I mean, just pick a chair. So, while everybody comes up, I'm going to just start with an elephant in the room. And the elephant was pointed out to us in the US through this election. And the elephant is that however a country is organized and however it does its business, if the combination of the organized companies and the financial services and the consulting firms and the rest of the private sector entities that employ in India only 10% of the people, as we just learned, but in America, probably 40%, 45%. If that combination of sectors extracts more value than it delivers back, then you can end up electing Donald J. Trump as your president. And I would say that is the elephant in the room, and it isn't leaving. So this is a big topic that we're talking about here because we just had, our nation just had a significant portion of their voters say that's unacceptable. And again, as everybody gets, please come on up. And as you've already figured out, I'm not Nita Misra. We have 40 minutes. 40 minutes. And given the limited time, and given that I haven't even met everybody here, I'm going to take from this topic we just had and go directly into asking some of these folks to comment. And I'm going to do that by simply saying, we just had 3 examples from Justin about what I'll say were 2 of the ways in which shared value gets implemented. So there's the more traditional, what some other people call inclusive business way of implementing shared value. And some of your efforts currently are in that category. And we had the cocoa supply chain issue, which is a very clear example of that. The other 2 were more market-oriented categories where the shared value was creating value for both the company and the people in the marketplace and trying to make the people in the marketplace more able to do what they need to do as people in addition to just buying the company's products. And in all 3 of these cases, a normal execution of a project by a single company would not have created any measurable impact at the country level. And so the players stepped in and did things differently. So I'm going to start out with Namita. And I'm going to ask her to talk about, in particular, their effort in inclusive finance, and then more specifically about some of the stuff they're doing in gender finance. And can you kind of put that in that context and talk about how you're getting bigger?
Sure. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. I think, the word bank has been probably used a lot these days over the last 1 week, given the demonetization efforts by the government. While the success and the efficacy of this watershed move is currently unclear, undoubtedly the role that banks play, which is very central to an economy, has been established. And therefore, we believe very much at Yes Bank that it's all about creating, so it's not so shared value for us is not really an isolated phenomena, but it is really an integrated model with the business strategy. And to be able to do that, for banks, access to finance is the most core, that is the core element. And Yes Bank has been working on multiple shared initiatives, some which I would like to highlight, out of which one very recent and important one is that we see that there are about 900 million mobile market penetration in India, right? Out of which there are about 400 that are smartphones and just about 150 that have access to internet. So what we did is in a view to give access to finance to the rest of the 700 million target market, we went out and innovated on a slim sleeve, sorry, it's difficult for me to pronounce it, a slim sleeve that gets fitted on the SIM card and which provides access without internet to banking. So that's a huge initiative that is now going around in the country, because that would provide access to finance, because we believe it's not just about opening bank accounts but going beyond that. The gender financing facility is another one which we believed would matter to the stakeholders, because one of the biggest stakeholders for the bank is women from that aspect. And this is a facility that we signed up with the International Finance Corporation, where we said that a particular focus and a particular line of credit was very important. And this has enabled, what we've seen is, through this kind of a facility, there is a lot of impact on the bottom line of businesses through women entrepreneurs, plus the use of technology, which has really gone up. So if you ask me how do you know that, I will come to that shortly. The third area that I want to really focus on is another huge shared value model that we've created, which is under the CSR program for the bank. And you know that in India there is 2% of CSR profits that go towards CSR. And we said that water is one of the biggest deficits that we have seen in the country. So how do we actually feed that gap? And water touches all our stakeholders across the upstream, in-stream and the downstream of the stakeholders that we have identified and we manage. And we work with a very unique technology which purifies water up to 100%, zero electricity and zero wastage. So it beats any of the RO technologies that are available. And the cost of the water is 6 paise per liter. So that's really the cheapest. We went about first with Raigad area in Maharashtra, close to our own business, providing safe, clean drinking water to communities there. We've adopted 1,000 railway stations. These are D and E category railway stations where water is not sold. There's no bottled water that sells. So providing water to those railway commuters that are there, and we touch 2 lakh people every day. That's the kind of volume that has been given. And what is proven is that environmentally the solution is clean, because there's no groundwater treatment that needs to be done. There's no electricity that is used, and a huge impact on lives of those commuters who otherwise don't get safe, clean drinking water. And therefore, medical and education, poverty, all those parameters are met. But we said, what is important is free is not sustainable. So how do you actually come up with sustainable models which can be scalable? So we've just launched water ATMs. So like cash ATMs, water ATMs, where water will be dispensed, and these are stations which are, so the competition is with 60 rupees per 5 liters, where we are doing 20 rupees for 5 liters. And these are the stations like Nizamuddin and in and around Delhi, where we have started, and along with the Delhi Jal Board in certain urban slums of Delhi, this entire project has been undertaken. So we believe that that really meets the triple bottom line for the bank, because at the end of the day, when you look at From a climate finance perspective, and I'm drawing that analogy here, when you look at a climate finance perspective across the world or even in India, what we've seen is the phenomena is climate finance is more diverted towards renewable energy. But climate finance, there's more to it, where there's water, there's sustainable agriculture, there's natural capital, so on and so forth. So how for the bank can we then create a market from a water standpoint is the next stance that we want to take, and therefore we've entered into the water sector. My last point is on measurement, which is extremely important, and we believe what gets measured, of course, is managed very well, and we are able to report very well. So we have a formula that we've drawn, which is E or SROI, so it's environment return on investment or a social return on investment, and through this formula we are able to actually analyze the impact that is created on the beneficiaries, which is of a big importance. So in another project, MSME project, that we have on energy efficiency, every 1 rupee that is invested, the SROI on that is 2 rupees 78 paise. That's the calculation, and it also tells us on ground implementation. So we believe that that's really the ecosystem that one has to enter, and that's really the approach that we need to look at in a very holistic manner. Thank you.
So you should have been in Stockholm at World Water Week giving that same presentation.
I missed it because I was somewhere else.
Yes. You will all hear this from me again and again and again, and this is a perfect example where you have a model that Yes Bank has come forward with that is significantly better than most of the models that were presented in Stockholm, if I understand it correctly, because I was there. And you're going to hear again and again from me that India understands these scale opportunities better than any other country. And the rest of the world needs you to step up and needs you to be the world scale leader. Now, Shiva, could you kind of look at what Namika said and give us your thinking on that supply chain versus market opportunity question, because you're doing, your stuff is really integrating both, but what have you learned about that integration that that's enabled you to scale up?
Thank you very much. I represent Mother Dairy here, and when I talk Mother Dairy, it's a little bit of National Dairy Development Board and Mother Dairy, so a little bit of the two will come. I heard one really important sentence which somebody else mentioned, which is a socially responsible corporate, and I think it rings a bell in more ways than one. I think it's to do with the genetic code of the company, and therefore how do you really think through it. In that context, I'm actually going to list out about 5 areas that we think is fundamental. How do you work around problem solving and societal problem solving, and not from a CSR perspective, but you need to integrate it into the way you work, some of which could be opportunistic, but clearly helping out. To give you an example, I think it's been many years now that we are really talking of social inclusion or financial inclusion. We've had this whole demonetization issue. Honestly, we guys are so proud of the fact that about 200,000 farmers, either through ourselves or through our producer companies, have not had a single issue over the last 10 days or 15 days, only because all the 200,000 of them are getting their funds directly through the banking system. And therefore, all the way through, this is an effort which we had initiated almost 2.5 years ago. And we felt that was the right thing to do then. It took us a hell of a lot of time to get every one of them into the whole system. But the impact of this is not funny. The amount of money which the farmer sees in his bank account, his savings potentials which goes up, is much more than just the issue of today of whether he has cash or doesn't have cash. That's not the issue. But it actually changes the whole social fabric of how they work and how they really come into the entire financial system. Institution creation. we are talking of inclusion of gender. We've actually experimented with one entire organization. When I mean entire organization, it's almost inclusion of the male gender by exclusion or by, how shall I put it, by exception, all the way down. So we are talking of a large organization of about almost 500 crore company, equity with the women, managed by the women, operated by the women, and this is in heartland of Andhra Pradesh. It can work. That's an experimental model which we're really trying to take to say, hey, how much more can we do of the same? From an institution creation, we guys believe genuinely in that whatever we do with the procurement system, can you convert it, can you spin it off into an institution? Somebody mentioned about letting go and how by empowering someone else, you actually empower yourself. It's a classic case where we do not have any control over our procurement because all our procurement systems have been spun off into individual companies on their own with the genuine appreciation that we are talking of interdependent and independence. So that's how we're really working in. The third area is around the consumer. We are in the food business, but at small costs, the entire issue of fortification, we are amongst the world's largest in anemia and associated issues. So what can we do? We've actually taken it up. For the last 4 decades, we've been fortifying our milk with vitamin A. We've not got any support from the government for it, and that's not the issue. I'm not trying to say that this is from a CSR perspective, but the fundamental need is that there is severe issues of malnutrition in the whole system. But we believe that if you were to do something with it, yes, for sure our brand will improve. But the intention is first solve the problem, be a part of the solution, you will reap the benefit. But till you don't think about it in that context, it gets to become always a showstopper because it becomes a project review. It becomes a project appraisal. What is the cost benefit? Now, if I were to do a little bit of vitamin A or vitamin D fortification, my sales is not going to improve in the next 6 months or in the next 1 year. No financial CFO will approve that project on that ground.
Shiva, I think we're going to have to stop with the free. And this is a perfect segue to Nisha. And Nisha, I know what you're going to talk about, but what I really want you to think and talk about is that example that he just left on the table, because you're going to talk about working with the largest food companies in the world, all of whom have their programs, and none of whom are actually solving the stunting and malnutrition problem in the world. So how does what you do with the food companies potentially have that make this connection?
Thank you so much. So I'm from Oxfam, India. I'm unusual on this panel in that the others are for-profit companies. We are an NGO, but we are very heavily engaged with the private sector. And the reason is, I think what we heard earlier, that we believe that the SDGs cannot be attained without a very important role for the private sector, which is different from the last 15 years where we used to think of poverty reduction as only something that governments and NGOs do. So we are very engaged. We also believe it's really about what we heard about from the earlier two speakers about how businesses do their business. And it's not about CSR. And I think that companies law and the 2% is unfortunately a big distraction in India because it lets companies off the hook from doing what we just heard from 2 very good examples of really doing business well rather than doing business badly and then spending 2% on building 3 schools or feeding 10 children. So it's come at a very unfortunate time, we believe. Now, what we do, we look at many problems in the world and try to look for global solutions because while we are an Indian organization, we are also part of a global network that works in 100 countries. And so one of the big issues we look at is food. And we were looking at this issue where we're living in a world where there's more than enough food production to feed everybody, and yet 800 million people are going to bed hungry every night. And what are the kinds of issues? Why is there so much poverty still in a world with so much plenty? And one of the creative ways in which we thought of engaging with the private sector is a campaign that we call Behind the Brands. And we took the 10 largest food and beverages companies. So this is really an NGO engaging with the 10 largest companies, with Coca-Cola, Danone, General Mills, Kellogg, Mars, Mondelez, ABF, Nestle, PepsiCo, Unilever. You look at the scale of the kind of impact we were trying to reach by really taking on the very large ones and saying, let's look at how they do business, not in an add-on way, but factors that lead to poverty. And the 7 factors that we care about, where we see these are the root causes of why poverty doesn't get addressed in countries. Number 1, land, the land issue. Are these companies acquiring land fairly, or are they indulging in land grabs? If you're not going to pay a fair price for the land itself, you're starting business off badly. Number 2, women. As you just said, up and down the food chain, it's all women, whether they're producing the food or marketing it and so on. Number 3, farmers. Again, you look at our country, 50% of the population is still engaged in farming. It's a sector in deep distress. The bulk of the poor now, the 25% that live below a very low poverty line, would be farmers. And the country really hasn't invested very much. The government, I would say, hasn't invested, but you're seeing some very, very good examples coming from the private sector of how to give the farmers a fair share of the produce. Farm workers, again, another category. Of course, climate change. What is different in the SDGs, it's taken on some very big global problems. Climate change for the first time. Inequality. You see, we talked about Americans needing sympathy, and now all the analysis coming out saying post-financial crisis, the very sharp increases in inequality that are leading to a very bad kind of politics in the world. So looking at inequality issues, climate change issues, gender issues, the kinds of problems we never thought we could tackle, we put them on the table and said, we're going to tackle all these by 2030. So climate change, water, we just talked about water. We are seeing water wars in India, and everybody says that will be the biggest cause of conflict, which we are seeing already, and the refugee crisis and so on. And finally, transparency. Are these companies making an effort to put what they're doing out in the public so that the public can engage? Now, what we did then is on these 7 critical factors, we rated these companies. Each of them got a score of 10. We talked to the companies. We used only the publicly available information because that is all we had, but we did engage with the companies. And we made all this information available, our ratings from 2013 onwards, every year. And we got the consumers to engage. And one of the things that Vivek said, that change will not come in a company till there's some pressure. Maybe some companies, enlightened ones, will do it on their own, but we also heard it's just a handful of early adopters. The others are still going to need some kind of pressure. We had 700,000 consumers write in to these companies directly to say we need change. We need you to act more responsibly. And I'm very pleased to say that in all the 10 companies, we are seeing significant improvements. We rate them, we make that publicly available to consumers, and we get people to write in. So whether it's issue of really looking at the whole supply chain and doing an audit on gender, whether it's an issue of many of these companies have signed a declaration saying we are not going to grab land, zero tolerance to land grab. The 3 areas where we've seen the biggest impact is land, gender, and climate change. Very, very big issues. So we are very pleased with this, and we, of course, we'll take it forward.
So real quickly, you've essentially created the need for the executive leaders of these companies to be sensitive to a range of issues.
Right.
And they will do a set of things around those issues that will broadly improve the world and the sector. But they are food companies. Mm-hmm. They're supposed to be fixing people who are sick because they don't have food. How do you get them, in addition to doing the broad, general, great to hear but hard to track stuff, how do you get them now to take the next step and come in and say, we're also going to adopt the stunting goal in the SDGs. It's going to be a primary activity of ours, and we're going to admit we don't know shit about stunting, even though we're a food company, pardon the French. How do you get them to make that move to actually working on real problems where you've got 40% of the children under 5 in India partially or more than partially stunted?
Well, I'm talking about the big things because we are talking about scale and impact, but the actual actions they are taking are very much on the ground. Paying somebody a fair price for their land, giving farmers a fair price. So in some of these cases, if you look at the supply chain, farmers were getting 5% say of a chocolate bar being sold. We're looking at cocoa farmers. And now it's gone up to 20%. Putting money into the hands of poor people is going to affect stunting, nutrition, and all these problems. So really, if you can get the money down to the poor people, give them, we're talking about living wages, so pay people a fair price so that at least those who are working full-time are not living in poverty. These are very, very concrete steps that companies have taken.
So we'll have a side session, because
Yeah.
it turns out, not surprisingly, there are people in India who are very focused on this problem and who are about to bring to the market solutions that should get massive support from companies. And there's no mechanism to translate that support into those best in the world solutions that are going to come from India.
Yeah.
Garish, can you give us kind of the farmer side view of what you do that can impact broadly?
All right. First of all, the businesses that we are in 3 businesses. We are there in refrigerated logistics, we are in solar, and we are there in LED lighting. So we don't directly deal with the farmers. Okay. We deal with businesses that have a social impact. And when we started the company, so ours is an agri startup. We started about 3 years back. And when we started our organization, we decided to track and monitor the kind of impact that it is going to have on multiple aspects. So in our solar business, we look at the kind of savings that we do on electricity, and we measure that, and we put that on our website as well. We are also there in rural electrification. We have electrified close to 70 villages till date in UP, and we therefore track the number of households that we have helped with light, and the number of people that have benefited from that. We are also there in the refrigerated logistics industry, and therefore we measure the quantum of food that we have saved by preventing it from perishing. If you look at India's food supply chain, close to about 30 to 40% gets wasted, and that is not a loss in physical weight, that is a loss in the value of the commodity that one is moving. So in our effort, by using coal transportation, we prevent that loss to that degree. But to answer your question on how programs like these can impact farmers, if I can share an example from my previous organization. This example is from Kargil, where I was working a few years back, and I was there for about 7 years. So Kargil and SAB Miller had united to undertake a program for barley, and this program was being conducted in Rajasthan. And SAB Miller makes beer, and therefore they required barley. So what they did was they did a public-private program in collaboration with the government of Rajasthan, whereby they took the barley seeds from the government, distributed it amongst the farmers, and offered a buyback guarantee to the farmer. So therefore, what it did and the way it benefited the farmer was, he did not have to go to the mandi. He had to come to these designated centers, and he was given a fair price. The payment of the commodity was fair. There was complete transparency in terms of the quality and the kind of discounts that would be offered and the premium that would be paid. And overall, over a period of 3 years, SAB Miller shifted their entire procurement program, courtesy the help of Kargil, from being dependent on the traders in the mandi to being able to buy and procure directly from the farmers. And they were also therefore able to give a lot of agri-advisory to the farmers, a lot of extension services went to the farmers. The company was also able to bring other participants in the ecosystem, like your fertilizer companies, your pesticide companies, your farm implement companies onto the platform, so that they are able to provide a comprehensive one-stop solution to the farmers. And that, I would think, is a very prime example on how programs can be structured, while at the same time being a part of the organization's DNA, and then benefit the farmer community also.
Great. So I'm going to have Himanshu and Deidre speak next. And
David, I just have a request of constructive suggestion. If the speakers just speak about 60 to 90 seconds who they are, then you understand which company they come from.
well, they're on the agenda. Just please use the agenda.
Sorry, then
No. So, Deidre, while you're listening to Manju, I know there's some stuff that you probably plan to say. I would love it if you would kind of pull together the panel for us from your perspective and think about how would you think about this group doing collective action together as opposed to maybe what you planned on talking about. So, Himanshu, please, you're interesting in that you are not an Indian headquartered company, you're a US headquartered company. And I'd love to hear not so much just about your program, but really now that you have a successful effort that's widely considered highly innovative, and you're in the India context and trying to figure out how to build out from that context to be more impactful, what does the next stage look like for you, and how do you bring that stage to your compatriots that have to support you?
Okay, thanks, David. I think what I would start with is, I'll take 60 seconds to be a bit provocative. And I'm hearing multiple sentiments in this room since morning, and a lot of them tend to confuse between what I call philanthropy and shared value. To me, shared value is like this, that I'm a commercial enterprise, my job is to make money, I want to make money, I work in self-interest. When the social interest and my self-interest coincide, it becomes a shared value. And in many of these cases, we are looking at cases why those food companies are not targeting malnutrition, because they don't see an opportunity today. I'm sorry for saying that. And I don't come from those companies, but I'm saying because they don't see it. Are they offering the right kind of leadership? Probably yes, probably not. I don't know, I'm not there to judge that. But we need to look at it in the context of how one is looking at his own business strategy. And when Shiva says, I'm going and fortifying, he has a long-term differentiated advantage coming to the business as a result of that. And to me, and I'll give you the genesis of that to tell you how do we look at it. We are in the cleaning and hygiene space in the country, and we are by far the leaders. Leaders as in by, the next player is say 1/10 or 1/15 of our size. So naturally, it's not like you can have a very collaborative, multiple pronged effort in the country. Now, where are we? What limits our growth? Is the willingness of the customers to adopt a scientific way to clean. And what restricts it? Availability of scientifically trained manpower or a scientific concept of cleaning. So we recognize our bottom line, our problem comes where people are okay with any level of cleaning, number one. The janitor or the cleaner who comes doesn't find anything wrong with whatever he is doing. So we said, if we start training and offering employment to the unemployed youth in the country and raising the dignity of the individual who's indulging in these jobs, it will serve our purpose. Do we employ them? No. But it's a bit longer term view which we have taken, and we are trying to work and create an industry standard about what should be a good, should we call him a office boy or a cleaner? No. I think he's a health technician. To me, he's more important than a doctor. Doctor addresses the problem when you fall sick. And what he is doing is keeping the place clean and preventing the illness. All kinds of infection, whether it's a, SARS or H1N1 and whatever. Now, so let us give him more respect. So we change the designation. All his certification says health hygiene technician. And we picked up this idea from Japan. Japan uses this idea. And we are trying to make it a movement. We have worked with the industry. So all those, the building service contracting companies, we work with them. We say, come to, we work with NGOs to get these people attracted to the program because we don't have the outreach. Train them. We have a mobile training center, can train them anywhere. Get them an employment as locally as possible, not asking them to relocate to Mumbai or Delhi for getting employed. And employment is guaranteed. Upgradation is guaranteed. We are still in the initial stages. I can't call it a success today. but we have achieved about 500 people have been trained. Now, it's been a long journey, a lot of learnings, a lot of stretches, because nobody aspires to be a cleaner in his life, even if he is educated, uneducated, because that doesn't get the respect of the society, especially in a caste-based society like India, where it's seen to be a very lowly job. So coming back to what we are trying to do is, I think we have a long journey. And I'm not trying to claim that, what will be the next step. For me, the step is to focus, build it large enough that we are training 10 to 15 to 20,000 people in a year. And not only us, there are 5 other companies interested in doing the same job with us. And we offer our training and the program, and that, to me, that's my next step.
Great, great. So your choice, Deidre.
Well, yeah, thanks for throwing that little curveball at me.
Try to leave us a couple of minutes for
Sure.
questions.
Okay. So let me start by addressing where David redirected this by talking a little bit, not so much about collective action, but about the building blocks for collective action. And I think this is a theme that draws through what I heard from everyone about the continuum from philanthropy to shared value, through CSR to shared value, or the moving from CSR to SRC. And a lot of the conversation in the room has been around the strategy and the leadership that drives that, which is clearly a really important ingredient. But you're not going to bake it into your organization until your employees are on board with it too. Yeah. So one thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is a strategy to get your employees engaged in shared value and to get some new insights for shared value and to build some of those cross-sector leadership skills that Justin talked about in his opening. And from my experience, really the single best way to do that is through pro bono programming. So taking your top talent and sending them, whether it's across borders or within your own country, to use their core business skills to address a social challenge. And why do I think this is such a great approach? First of all, because it addresses some of the challenges you have with talent attraction and retention. More and more today, young folks want to work for companies that they see as socially responsible, and they want to have these opportunities to be engaged with the community. It addresses the employee engagement issue that's high on the minds of any leader. It really does give you insights into your markets to be closer to the people that are your potential consumers, and can even serve as a bit of an R&D, a research and development laboratory. Lots of corporations are doing this now, and I really do think that we're not going to bake the kind of empathy that's required to really buy in fully to shared value until people are a little bit closer to some of the real problems that are being faced. And we don't have a lot of time to talk about it, but happy to talk with anyone about what pro bono strategies look like. Our country director, Kabi Sherman from India, is here. She runs a lot of pro bono programs in this country, so feel free to reach out to her. So once you get some of those building blocks down, you've got your leadership, you've got your strategy, you've got your employees that are bought in, then you can start to talk about collective action. Because if you have a bunch of companies that are just doing project-based shared value, it's not going to lead to collective action. I think the problem that we face in talking about collective action is that we'll talk about the SDGs. We'll say 17 things, end hunger, end climate change. These are too big for collective action. Now, you raise the issue of stunting. There's a real specific and solvable problem. So what if all of the companies that could have an impact on that specific problem, not on the end hunger problem, were able to come together and say, here's the resources I can bring. And that's not just the food companies. It's the transportation companies. It's the technology companies that are doing the modeling. It's the financial inclusion models. So if we start to move more companies along this continuum toward shared value, when we're closer to here, you can say, this is what we care about as a company because it's a business opportunity. Absolutely. And it's a business opportunity for you, and it's a business opportunity for you, and then we can come together for the collective action. But until we get all those pieces together, one, that leadership is on board, that strategy is good, that the employees are on board, that the consumers are pushing, and that we are all narrowly focused on something that's actually solvable, then we're just putting a million drops in a million buckets, and that's just not good enough anymore.
Thank you. So, quickly, are there two burning questions? Are there no burning questions? Okay, okay, right here, very quickly, ask both questions. You first. Go ahead. Please, Mike, please, please, please.
Very good morning, everyone. My question is, when we talk about shared value and CSR, so you likely spoke about hunger and the farming-related issues. But when we see those issues, farming, when we talk about people below poverty line, they are not mostly farmers. They are either marginal farmers or farm laborers. Okay, number one. Number two is, when we talk about poverty, we generally do not talk about health issues. So say, on an average, 40% to 50% of their income, in fact, in a rural household, poor rural household, goes into healthcare. And they mostly go to quacks, or it can go to anyone. So generally, no one is taking care of that. So we generally talk about, high-level terms like, farming. We generally talk about, interventions. But we do not talk about how healthcare is impacting their lives. How lack of healthcare facilities is actually making their life a hell. So how do you, plan to take these things further?
So that's a great question, but we don't have any people on this panel who are working in that space. So I'm going to introduce you to Malik Ethia when he gets here later today, and you and he are going to have a phenomenal conversation about that question. Sir, your question.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. I'm Anirudh. I teach organizational strategy. And from an organizational perspective, my research area is what kind of organizational forms you need to develop in order to have shared value strategy integrated into the organizational design. Because if you don't have a proper organizational design, you end up wasting a lot of time in trying to include shared value.
My goodness.
Typically, organizations design top-down, profit-oriented. Now you want to bring in a new logic with shared value. So you need a different kind of mentality. Amul has fantastic. I mean, Amul is a gold nugget in the shared value. But not all organizations can be designed to have shared value completely integrated into their organizational design. And without that, you just can't do it. End up wasting a lot of time, money, and effort.
Shiva, can you comment on that? Because you have a completely different organizational
It's a very
design.
fair question. In my view, there are two aspects to it. I think it starts with financial measures of performance. And because more than the organization design, I mean, this is my perspective, it could be wrong. The perspective I carry is you have financial parameters of performance and non-financial parameters of performance. Where are we putting the shared values as a metric of performance within the organization is critical, because you have to drill it into the organization all the way through. So you need one, maybe two, maybe three parameters that you are setting up as part of your strategy. Once you are able to do it, then these parameters are driven into the organization, and over a period of time, it will come back to you. To give you an example, one of our metrics is what is the percentage of the consumer rupee that goes back to the farmer. It's a non-financial metric for me because it doesn't come into my P&L at all. But once you've put this in, we are starting to figure out saying, okay, in coriander it's 30%, in milk it's 70%, now what can I do to move this 30 and 70? This doesn't mean I'm going to reduce my margins, but what do I do to keep pushing this 30 to 70? And I'm giving two extreme cases, one which lasts for 2 hours and the other one which lasts for a little longer period. So that's the kind of game that you'll have to play to figure it out.
My experience of hearing this gentleman for the last 24 hours is any of you who have any questions about innovating organizations, you should talk to him.
Oh, thank you. This feels nice. This feels nice.
Now, our time is up. I want to say something very quickly, but I hope everybody can hear this. Himanshu mentioned the food companies, and he mentioned the profit-making goal. And he did something that we often do when we're in the profit-making business, and that is we use that profit-making goal to justify the way we do business. Yeah. And I can assure you that Oxfam figured out that in that industry, they had done that, and it was leading to disaster after disaster. And you can see that by the fact that the next industry group that is expecting to be sued the way the cigarette companies were sued in the United States is the food industry. So never forget, no matter what industry you're in, if you can't understand the context of the people that you live and work with relative to the way you do business, and therefore you have chosen to do business in a way that could lead you to be sued, you are so far from where you need to be that you need to strike out immediately, as rapidly as you can, to get away from where you are, because you are in the absolute wrong place. Thank you.
No, that's exactly about leadership. I'll just say. So when you choose to take a wrong path or a so-called right path, that determines how successful or how big a failure will you be. The only thing which I was trying to say is that shared value is about integrating your social goals and business goals without compromising the profit objective together.
Yeah.
And some companies do it early, see it long term, some don't. And that makes a difference between who does what kind of a job.
And we have a great example here of the need to do that.
Yeah,
and we have a great example of the industry and the NGO sector, in particular Oxfam in this case, striking out to help make that move.
Absolutely.
But we have so much more we can do in actually getting to the next stages of real shared value solutions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hand for the panel.